The crimson warning lights bathed the bridge of the research vessel, Star Falcon in an ominous red glow. Dr. Kim Hana stood frozen at the massive viewport, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she watched 8 Council warships emerge from hyperspace like dark angels of death. Each vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers in length, their matte black hulls bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes, enough destructive power to crack a moon in half. "Countdown initiated," announced the cold synthetic voice of the ship's AI. "Orbital bombardment commences in 72 hours. Behind her, Lieutenant Park Ji-won slumped in his communications chair, his normally steady hands trembling as he monitored the incoming transmissions. The young officer had seen 3 tours of duty along the outer rim, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "They're really going through with it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's life support systems. 70,000 Kithra, gone, just like that. Hana pressed her palm harder against the viewport, feeling the subtle vibration of the ship's engines through the cold metal. Below them, Viridian 7 spun lazily on its axis, a beautiful world of crystalline forests and silver rivers that would soon become a graveyard of glass and ash. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very planet that had sparked humanity's first contact with 17 different alien species would now witness the systematic extermination of another. The Kithara had first appeared in the colony records 6 months ago. 8-foot-tall apex predators with metallic silver fur that caught starlight like liquid mercury. They moved through the crystal forests of Viridian 7 with an otherworldly grace that belied their massive size. Their amber eyes glowed with an inner fire that seemed almost supernatural, and their howls could be heard across vast distances, creating haunting symphonies that echoed through the colony's domes at night. But it wasn't their beauty that had caught the Galactic Council's attention. It was their efficiency as killers. The attacks had started small, mining equipment disappearing, survey teams finding their camps ransacked. Then came the first death. Mining supervisor Kang Woo-jin found torn apart at the edge of Site Delta 7, his emergency beacon still flashing uselessly in the crystalline undergrowth. The Zephyrian colonists, with their 6 arms and chitinous exoskeletons, had initially dismissed it as an isolated incident. Predators existed on every world, after all, but the Kithara were learning. Each attack grew more sophisticated. They began targeting communication arrays, isolating teams before striking. They learned to avoid the colonists' energy weapons, approaching from blind spots with military precision. By the 3rd month, entire mining operations were being shut down as 43 Zephyrians lay dead, and 17 more had simply vanished without a trace. The breaking point came when a pack of 12 Kithara had somehow infiltrated the main colony dome, a feat that should have been impossible given the advanced security systems. They'd moved through the residential sectors like ghosts, killing only specific targets before disappearing back into the crystal forests. The message was clear: nowhere was safe. That's when the Galactic Council had stepped in with their typical solution: complete and total annihilation. Hana pulled up the tactical display on her personal tablet, studying the attack patterns for the 100th time. Something nagged at her scientific mind, a pattern within the chaos that the Council's military analysts had completely missed. The strikes weren't random. They were surgical, calculated, almost protective. Every major attack had occurred within a 5-kilometer radius of the deep mining sites. The Kithara never ventured into the agricultural sectors or the residential areas unless they were pursuing a specific target. And those targets, she pulled up the victim profiles, were all directly involved in the expansion of mining operations into the planet's deepest crystal formations. "Captain Lee," she called toward the bridge, her voice cutting through the tension that had settled over the crew like a suffocating blanket. "Request permission to take a shuttle planetside." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Captain Lee Minho emerged from the command center, his weathered face showing every one of his 50 years in space. He'd served alongside Hana for 3 years, long enough to recognize the dangerous gleam in her eyes that appeared whenever she'd latched onto a new theory. "Permission denied, Doctor," he said firmly, though his voice carried an undertone of regret. 3 xenobiologist teams have already been torn apart down there. The Council's top experts, people with decades of experience studying hostile alien species. I'm not losing my best researcher to those monsters. They're not monsters, Hana said quietly, her gaze returning to the planet below. Look at the data, Captain, really look at it. These attacks aren't random killing sprees. They're coordinated defensive actions. Park Ji-won swiveled his chair to face them, his young face pale but determined. Doctor, with respect, 43 people are dead. The Zephyrian children won't sleep without nightlights because they're afraid of the howling. How is that defensive? Hana turned from the viewport, her jaw set with the kind of determination that had carried humanity from a single world to the stars. In her eyes burned the same fire that had driven her ancestors to cross oceans and climb mountains simply because they were there. Because they're protecting something. And in 72 hours, 8 Council warships are going to turn whatever they're protecting into radioactive dust. The captain's expression hardened. The Council's decision is final, Doctor. Stand down. But Kim Hana had never been good at standing down. As she looked out at the Council's death fleet, she made a decision that would either save 2 species or get her killed trying. Then I guess I'll have to disobey orders. The stolen shuttle. Morning Star shuddered as it broke through Viridian 7's upper atmosphere, its heat shields glowing cherry red against the planet's twin moons. Dr. Kim Hana gripped the controls with white knuckles, her heart hammering as she piloted the craft through layers of crystalline dust that sparkled like diamond snow in the ship's exterior lights. She'd never stolen a spacecraft before, but desperate times called for desperate measures. 3 hours earlier, she'd waited in the shadows of Deck 7 until the night shift rotation began. The corridors of the Star Falcon had grown quiet, with only essential personnel manning their posts. Lieutenant Park Ji-won had been her unwitting accomplice, though she suspected he knew exactly what she was planning when she'd asked him about shuttle bay security protocols during their evening meal. The environmental scanners are acting up. Again, she'd told him casually, knowing he'd be the only one monitoring communications during the graveyard shift. Might need to run some diagnostics on the equipment. Park Ji-won had studied her face for a long moment, his young features serious beyond his years. Finally, he'd nodded slowly. Equipment malfunctions happen all the time out here. Sometimes it takes 30 minutes to get systems back online. The message was clear. She had half an hour before he'd have to report her unauthorized departure. Now, as the shuttle's navigation system chirped softly and displayed the approach vector to Colony Base Alpha, Hana felt the weight of her decision, settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Below her stretched an alien landscape that had claimed the lives of 3 separate research teams. Crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning bolts, some reaching heights of over 100 meters. The entire continent glittered with an otherworldly beauty that would soon be nothing but radioactive glass if the Council had their way. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud on the colony's main landing pad, its engines whining as they spun down. Through the cockpit window, Hana could see the emergency lights of the colony base flickering in the perpetual twilight of Viridian 7's long rotation cycle. The planet's day lasted 37 standard hours, and they were currently in the extended evening period when the crystal forests came alive with bioluminescent patterns. Colony Administrator Vel Nash was waiting for her before she'd even finished the shutdown sequence. The Zephyrian's 6 arms gestured frantically as he approached the shuttle, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with agitation. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving them incredible strength, but their nervous systems made them prone to anxiety in stressful situations. Human Dr. Kim, you must return immediately. Velnash's translator device struggled to keep up with his rapid speech patterns. The Council's bombardment fleet has given strict orders. No personnel. On planetary surface, the Cathara hunt in these crystal forests. No being survives contact with their packs. Hana ignored his protests as she gathered her equipment from the shuttle's cargo bay. She'd deliberately chosen to bring no weapons, only her portable scanner. Hooray, emergency medical supplies, and a basic survival kit. If her theory was correct, approaching the Cathara with hostile intent would be the worst possible strategy. "How many are in the largest pack?" she asked, adjusting the scanner's settings to detect large biological signatures. Velnash's compound eyes widened in horror. 12, led by the one we call Shadowmoor, a massive beast with scars across his face and shoulders. "Doctor, please. 3 entire xenobiologist teams have been torn apart by these creatures. Teams with military escorts and heavy weapons." But Hannah was already walking toward the forest's edge, where the crystal formations created a natural barrier between the colony and the wild interior. Each step crunched on smaller crystal growths that sprouted from the ground like alien flowers. Her scanner immediately began picking up energy readings from the formations. They seemed to pulse with their own internal light, creating a network of communication that stretched across the entire continent. The deeper she ventured into the crystal maze, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just a forest. It was a living system. The formations grew in patterns that channeled sound and light, amplifying the natural harmonics of the wind into hauntingly beautiful music. No wonder the colonists reported hearing the Kithara's howls from impossible distances. The entire forest was acting as a massive acoustic amplifier. As the twin moons reached their zenith, casting everything in an ethereal silver glow, Hannah's scanner detected movement, large signatures moving with coordinated precision through the crystal corridors. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to maintain a steady pace. Running would trigger every predatory instinct the creatures possessed. She found them at a natural clearing where 12 crystal spires formed a perfect circle. 12 massive forms emerged from between the formations like living shadows, their metallic silver fur catching the moonlight and reflecting it in rippling waves. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for creatures of their size, each step perfectly coordinated with the others. Shadowmoor stood directly in front of her, and Hannah's breath caught in her throat. The Alpha was easily twice her size, his shoulders level with her head. Deep scars crisscrossed his massive frame, telling the story of countless battles survived. His amber eyes held an intelligence that sent chills down her spine. This was no mindless beast. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, to raise her scanner defensively, to call for emergency extraction. Instead, Hannah did something that shocked even her own rational mind. She sat down cross-legged on the crystal ground, lowered her eyes in a gesture of submission, and waited. The pack moved closer, surrounding her in a perfect circle. She could feel the heat radiating from their massive bodies, hear the deep rumbles in their chests as they communicated through subsonic frequencies. The scent of ozone and something like cinnamon filled her nostrils, the smell of creatures that lived. Among the electrically charged crystal formations, for several heartbeats nothing happened. Then Shadowmoor lifted his great head toward the twin moons and released a sound that seemed to come from the very core of his being. It wasn't the roar of a predator or the howl of a hunter. It was something far more complex, a haunting harmonic note that resonated through the crystal formations and seemed to make the very air vibrate with emotion. One by one, the other pack members joined the song, their voices weaving together in perfect harmony. The sound built and expanded, echoing off the crystal spires and creating layers of melody that spoke of loss, of protection, of desperate love for something precious that was slipping away. As the last note faded into the alien night, Hannah looked up into Shadowmoor's glowing eyes and understood. This wasn't the sound of predators preparing to kill. It was the sound of parents mourning their children. The first morning brought terror that gradually melted into wonder. Hannah woke to find herself surrounded by a living wall of silver fur, the pack having formed a protective circle around her sleeping form. Shadowmoor's massive head rested just 3 feet away, his amber eyes watching her with an intelligence that made her question everything she thought she knew about animal behavior. As the pack stirred to life with the rising of Viridian 7's primary sun, Hannah began to notice patterns that the previous research teams had completely missed. The Kithara weren't random killers. They operated with military precision. Each member had a specific role, moving through the crystal forests with practiced coordination that spoke of generations of evolutionary refinement. She watched as 2 smaller pack members, scouts, she realized, returned from the direction of the colony. Their body language spoke volumes as they approached Shadowmoor with lowered heads and rapid, chittering vocalizations. The Alpha's response was immediate and decisive. The entire pack moved as one, flowing through the crystal corridors like liquid mercury. Following at a respectful distance, Hana observed something that made her scientific mind race. The Kithara were conducting surveillance. They positioned themselves at key vantage points overlooking the mining operations, studying the human and Zephyrian work patterns with the focus of career military officers. They weren't hunting prey. They were gathering intelligence. On the second day, her portable scanner picked up something extraordinary. The crystal formations weren't just conducting sound, they were transmitting complex electromagnetic patterns. As she watched the pack communicate through a series of low-frequency vocalizations, her equipment registered corresponding energy spikes from the surrounding crystals. The entire forest was acting as a massive communication network, allowing the Kithara to coordinate across vast distances. "It's like a biological internet," she whispered to herself, frantically taking notes on her tablet. "They're using the planet's natural formations as a telepathic amplifier." But it wasn't until the third morning that Shadowmoor showed her the truth that would change everything. The Alpha approached her carefully, his massive form moving with surprising gentleness. He began a series of complex gestures, pointing toward the colony with his enormous paws and then touching his chest. When Hana failed to understand, he did something that made her heart skip a beat. A warm pressure filled her mind, like sunlight filtering through water. Images flashed behind her eyes, not her own memories, but something else entirely. She saw the crystal forests as they had existed before the colony arrived, teeming with hundreds of Kithara, living in perfect harmony with their environment. She saw great chambers deep beneath the surface, where crystalline cocoons glowed with inner light, protecting the developing young of their species. Then came the miners with their heavy drilling equipment, boring deep into the planet's crust without knowing what lay beneath. The images in her mind showed the moment of first contact, not the violent attacks described in the colony reports, but desperate parents trying to communicate with aliens who couldn't understand their pleas. "My God," Hana breathed, her hands trembling as she activated her communicator. The device crackled with static from the electromagnetic interference of the crystal formations, but Park Ji-won's voice came through clearly enough. "Dr. Kim, thank the stars you're alive. The captain is furious, but he's been stalling the council's demands for your extraction. What have you learned?" Hana looked at Shadowmoor, who watched her with ancient patience. "The attacks weren't random, Ji-won. They were surgical strikes trying to drive the miners away from specific locations. The Kithara aren't hunters, they're parents trying to save their children." She quickly explained her discoveries about the underground birthing chambers, the telepathic communication network, and the coordinated intelligence behind every attack. As she spoke, she pulled up her scanner readings, documenting the energy signatures that proved the crystal formations were more than just geological structures. "The mining operation has been drilling directly into their nurseries," she continued, her voice growing urgent. "Every random attack targeted personnel who were expanding the deep excavation sites. They've been trying to tell us to stop, but we couldn't understand their language." Through the telepathic connection that was growing stronger each hour, Shadowmoor shared more images. Hana saw his own mate, a magnificent creature with silver fur that seemed to contain captured starlight, trapped in a collapsed chamber directly beneath mining site Delta 7. 3 small forms huddled beside her, barely visible through the crushing weight of fallen crystal formations. The orbital bombardment was scheduled to begin in 18 hours, and the massive drilling platform at Delta 7 was continuing its excavation schedule, unaware that each vibration might be sealing the fate of an entire family trapped below. "Ji-won, I need you to run a deep scan analysis on the colony's geological surveys," Hana said, her fingers flying across her tablet as she transmitted her data. "Cross-reference the attack locations with the mining expansion sites. I'm betting you'll find that every single incident corresponds to areas where the excavation reached a depth of 40 to 60 meters. As her data uploaded through the interference, Shadowmoor approached again. This time, the telepathic images came with overwhelming emotion, desperation, love, and a parent's willingness to die protecting their young. She saw the moment when the mining platform's drill bit had punched through the chamber ceiling, causing the collapse that trapped his family. She felt his rage and helplessness as he realized that the strange alien creatures above ground couldn't understand his attempts at communication. "Doctor, the preliminary scans are confirming your theory." Park Ji-won's voice was tight with tension. "The geological surveys show massive hollow spaces beneath all the major mining sites. If these are breeding chambers, then we're about to commit genocide," Hana finished grimly. She looked up at the Council's warships, visible as distant points of light against the darkening sky. "And we have less than 18 hours to stop it." Shadowmoor's howl echoed through the crystal forests, joined by voices from across the continent, as the telepathic network carried news of the human who had finally learned to listen. For the first time in months, there was something other than despair in their song. There was hope. The colony's main hall erupted in chaos as Dr. Kim Hana walked through the reinforced doors with Shadowmoor padding silently beside her. 23 Zephyrian colonists scrambled backward, their 6 arms flailing as they reached for emergency alarms and weapon lockers. The massive Kithara's amber eyes swept the room with calm intelligence, but his presence alone was enough to send several colonists diving behind overturned tables. "Security breach, security breach." Administrator Velnash's voice cracked as he pressed himself against the far wall, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking rapidly, a sure sign of extreme panic in his species. "Human Dr. Kim has brought death into our sanctuary. Stand down." "Everyone." Hana raised her hands, positioning herself between the terrified colonists and Shadowmoor. "He's not here to hurt anyone. We need to talk." Mining Supervisor Odeho emerged from behind an overturned chair, his plasma rifle trained on the Kithara's massive chest. The weathered Korean man had survived 3 different alien conflicts during his 40 years in the mining corps, and his hands were steady despite the impossible situation. "Doctor, step away from that creature before it tears you apart." "Look at him, Supervisor." "Oh," Hana said calmly. "Really look. Does he appear aggressive to you?" Shadowmoor sat on his haunches, making himself as non-threatening as possible, despite his intimidating size. His head was lowered respectfully, and his massive paws were placed flat on the metal floor. Most importantly, his lips weren't pulled back to reveal the razor-sharp fangs that had terrorized the colonists for months. "You want us to work with those monsters?" Velnash's voice pitched higher with hysteria, his translator struggling to process his rapid speech. "These beasts have killed 43 of our people. They've made children afraid to sleep." "They're not monsters," Hana said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 days living among the pack. "They're parents trying to save their children, and if we don't help them in the next 16 hours, the Council's bombardment is going to kill an entire generation of sapient beings." The room buzzed with confused murmurs as colonists struggled to process her words. Sapient meant intelligent, capable of thought and reason, qualities that military briefings had assured them the Kithara completely lacked. To prove her point, Hana activated the colony's main holographic display system. The 3-dimensional projector hummed to life, creating a complex spatial puzzle that hung in the air like a constellation of light. It was a standard intelligence test used throughout the galaxy, dozens of interlocking geometric shapes that required advanced problem-solving, skills to arrange properly. "Shadowmoor," she said softly, gesturing toward the holographic construct. "Show them." The great wolf rose to his full height and approached the display with careful deliberation. His amber eyes studied the floating shapes for perhaps 30 seconds, analyzing angles and spatial relationships with the focus of a master mathematician. Then, with movements that were surprisingly gentle for such massive paws, he began manipulating the light constructs. Each holographic piece responded to his touch, sliding and rotating through 3-dimensional space. The colonists watched in stunned silence as Shadowmoor solved the puzzle in less than 2 minutes, a feat that typically took trained xenobiologists 15 minutes or more. When the final piece clicked into place, the completed structure pulsed with green light, indicating a perfect solution. The room fell completely silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Mining, Supervisor, Odai-ho slowly lowered. His weapon, his weathered face showing a mix of awe and horror. If what you're saying is true, we've been trying to exterminate a sapient species. Not trying, Hana corrected grimly. Succeeding. The mining operations have been crushing their nurseries for 6 months. Every attack was a desperate attempt to drive us away from their children. She quickly explained her discoveries about the underground birthing chambers, using her tablet to project geological scans that showed the massive hollow spaces beneath the mining sites. The evidence was overwhelming. Complex tunnel systems that could only have been created by intelligent design, chambers specifically constructed for protecting developing young, and a network of crystal formations that served as a planet-wide communication system. The trapped family is directly beneath mining site Delta 7, Hana continued, her voice urgent. Shadowmoor's mate and 3 pups are buried under tons of collapsed crystal. We have maybe 16 hours before the Council's bombardment turns this entire continent into glass. Chief Engineer Park Sunmi stepped forward, her practical mind already working on the logistics. The Mark 7 drilling platform at Delta 7 could reach that depth, but we'd need to modify the extraction protocols. One wrong move and we could bring down the entire tunnel system. That's where they come in, Hana gestured toward Shadowmoor. The Kithara know every tunnel, every weak point, every safe passage in their underground network. They can guide us through areas that our scanners can't map. The rescue operation began immediately, driven by the desperate urgency of their situation. The colony's maintenance bays transformed into command centers as humans, Zephyrians, and Kithara worked together. For the first time in either species' history, Shadowmoor's pack emerged from the crystal forests, moving with ghostly silence as they approached the mining site. Hana served as translator, her growing telepathic connection with the pack allowing her to interpret their communications into actionable engineering plans. They're saying the main support beam is crystalline formation, not metal, she called out, as the massive drilling platform repositioned itself. If we hit it with the plasma cutter, the whole section will collapse. The work was incredibly dangerous. Ancient crystal formations, some dating back millions of years, cracked and groaned under the weight of the heavy machinery. More than once, the entire tunnel system threatened to collapse as they carved their way deeper into the planet's crust. Emergency support beams were rushed into place while Park Sunmi's engineering team worked frantically to stabilize each section. Before moving forward, 12 hours into the operation, they hit their first major obstacle. A wall of fused crystal blocked their path, too thick for conventional drilling but too unstable for explosive charges. The human engineers stood baffled until 2 Kithara pack members approached the barrier and began a complex harmonic vocalization. This crystal wall resonated with their voices, developing hairline fractures that spread in precise geometric patterns. Within minutes, the entire barrier cracked apart like a giant puzzle, revealing the passage beyond. They're using sonic frequencies to fracture the crystal along its natural fault lines, Park Sunmi whispered in amazement. It's like they were born knowing the resonant frequency of every formation on this planet. As they pushed deeper into the underground labyrinth, Hana felt Shadowmoor's emotions growing stronger through their telepathic link. Hope mixed with desperate fear as they drew closer to his trapped family. She could sense other presences too, weak but alive, buried somewhere in the darkness ahead. Finally, after 18 hours of non-stop work, the drilling platform broke through into a natural chamber. Shadowmoor's howl of joy echoed through the tunnels as powerful lights illuminated the space beyond. There, huddled against the far wall, was a magnificent silver-furred female, and 3 small forms that tumbled toward their father with squeaks of pure happiness. Hana felt Shadowmoor's telepathic joy as a warm burst of golden light in her mind, and for the first time since arriving on Viridian 7, she allowed herself to smile. They had saved a family. Now they had to save 2 entire species. The ground beneath the colony shuddered as 8 massive council warships dropped out of hyperspace and assumed bombardment formation. Dr. Kim Hana stumbled from the tunnel entrance, her body aching from 20 hours of non-stop rescue operations. Crystal dust covered her from head to toe, turning her dark hair silver and making her look like she'd been touched by the alien world itself. Beside her, Shadowmoor emerged with his family, the great Alpha's amber eyes reflecting the ominous red. Saglow of the warship's targeting systems. His mate, who Hana had learned was called Star Whisper by the pack, moved gracefully despite her ordeal, while their 3 pups tumbled around her feet like playful shadows made of liquid mercury. The colony's main courtyard had transformed into a makeshift command center, with humans and Zephyrians working frantically to coordinate the evacuation that would never come in time. The Council's ultimatum was clear. All personnel had exactly 30 minutes to clear the bombardment zone before the planet's northern continent would be reduced to radioactive glass. "Dr. Kim!" Chief Engineer Park Sunmi called out as she approached with a portable communication array. "The fleet commander is demanding your immediate surrender. They're treating this as an act of rebellion against Council authority." Hana accepted the communicator with hands that shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. She looked around at the impossible scene. Humans, Zephyrians, and Kythera working together, the ancient enemies of minutes ago now united in desperate purpose. 3 species that had never imagined they could coexist were sharing tools, food, and hope. "All ships, this is Dr. Kim Hana," she broadcast on all emergency channels, her voice carrying across the void to 8 vessels bristling with enough firepower to crack moons. "I am transmitting comprehensive evidence of Kythera sapience and requesting immediate cessation of bombardment operations." The response came within seconds, the fleet commander's voice cold as deep space. "Dr. Kim, you are in direct violation of Galactic Council orders. You have interfered with a lawful military operation and endangered the lives of colonial personnel. Clear the bombardment zone immediately or be considered hostile combatants." Above them, the warship's weapon systems began to charge with an ominous whine that could be heard even through the planet's atmosphere. Massive plasma cannons swiveled toward their targets, while quantum torpedo tubes loaded their devastating cargo. The lead vessel, the dreadnought Cosmic Justice, positioned itself directly over the colony like a metal moon of death. "Fleet Commander, please review the transmitted data," Hana pleaded, uploading everything she'd learned, the intelligence tests, the communication networks, the evidence of complex social structures. "The Kythera are not mindless predators. They're a sapient species with families, culture, and the right to exist." "Data received and dismissed," came the reply. "Hostile alien species pose an unacceptable risk to colonial expansion. Bombardment commences in 60 seconds. That's when Shadowmoor did something that changed galactic history forever. The Great Alpha lifted his massive head toward the stars and released a call unlike anything Hana had heard before. It wasn't the mournful howl of the previous nights, but something deeper, more complex, a harmonic frequency that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of space itself. Across the crystal forests, hundreds of voices answered. Every Kythera on the continent joined their telepathic consciousness in perfect unity, their combined song amplified by the planet's natural crystal network until it became something far greater than the sum of its parts. The harmonic resonance was so powerful, it overloaded every communication array on the Council fleet. Emergency klaxons wailed as ship after ship reported system failures. But this wasn't an attack, it was a plea. The Kythera were opening their hearts and minds to the galaxy, sharing their deepest emotions and memories through pure telepathic projection. On the bridge of the Cosmic Justice, Fleet Commander Admiral Chen froze as alien thoughts flooded his consciousness. He saw through Kythera eyes, the joy of watching pups take their first steps, the grief of losing pack members to the mining accidents, the desperate love that drove parents to risk everything for their children. Captain Yoon Minji, the ship's tactical officer, felt tears streaming down her weathered face as images of Kythera families flashed through her mind. She saw their art, complex crystal sculptures that told stories spanning generations. She felt their music, harmonic frequencies that could calm storms and heal wounds. She experienced their philosophy, a deep reverence for life that made them incapable of killing except in defense of their young. Throughout the fleet, hardened soldiers who had never questioned orders found themselves sobbing as the Kythera's song reached into their souls. Communications officer Lieutenant Bayek Jinha tried to speak, but could only whisper. "They're just like us. They love their children just like us. The bombardment countdown reached 0, but no weapons fired. Fleet Commander, Captain Yoon's voice cracked with emotion. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the planetary surface. It's not aggressive, it's beautiful. Admiral Chen stared at the tactical display as the Kithara's telepathic song created visible patterns in space itself, geometric harmonies that painted the void with colors that had no names. For 40 years he'd served the Council without question, but this moment stripped away every certainty he'd ever held. Bombardment. Cancelled, he whispered, his words carrying to every ship in the fleet. All vessels stand down. We need to contact the Council immediately. 6 months later, Viridian 7 had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a protected world where 3 species lived and worked together as equals. The Crystal Forests now hosted joint research stations, where human scientists, Zephyrian engineers and Kithara guides explored the planet's mysteries together. Dr. Kim Hana served as the first human ambassador to the Kithara, her small office, built into a living crystal formation that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. She spent her days mediating between species, translating not just languages but entire ways of thinking. On quiet evenings, she would join Shadowmoor's pack for their traditional sunset run through the crystal corridors. Her human form looked impossibly small beside the massive aliens, but she moved with them as family, accepted as one of their own. As Viridian 7's twin moons rose over the alien landscape, the evening song began. Hundreds of Kithara voices joined, in the ancient harmony that had once been mistaken for the howls of mindless beasts. Tonight, as every night for the past 6 months, a human voice joined the chorus. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to see the soul behind the alien form, to find common ground where others saw only differences, and to choose understanding over fear when it mattered most. The Kithara's song rose toward the stars, carrying a message of hope across the void. In that harmony of voices, alien and human, ancient and new, lay the promise of a future where the galaxy's children could grow up together, learning that differences were not walls to divide them, but bridges to bring them home. The end.